Hello, and thank you for connecting with the Family of Faith, where we grow, serve, and care. We're excited about the word that we will be receiving today. Always remember to be strong and be encouraged. Family of Faith, looking for ways to connect? Here are opportunities to virtually connect with us. We look forward to connecting in person again very soon with you all.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I don't know if you can believe it, but we're actually at the end of the month of May, which was either the fastest or the slowest month that we've had so far, depending on how you look at it. Sometimes it's actually felt like both. So we sought to look at the message of the prophets for this month and this quarter until it's safe for us to gather again throughout the week, until we're able to meet physically and look at each other in the same place, in the same room, without being 6 feet apart from one another, and we can see our whole faces because we won't have on masks. But this has been, as you know, one of the means of discipleship that we are currently engaging in. Wednesdays, we meet here on Facebook and on YouTube. Saturdays, we're meeting in the afternoons with the children at 5:30 with Sister Osborne and with Deacon Marcus Jones at 6:30 on Teen Scene. Our young adults, fresh, our millennials, are meeting Friday nights at 8. And then our adults growing in Christ are meeting Sunday mornings at 9. And then our seniors, who are hilarious, who probably need their own reality show, are meeting via conference call every Wednesday at noon for a lunch and learn, chat and chew. And these have all been wonderful times. They've been enriching times. They've been enjoyable times for everybody involved. And we look to continue these as we are pressing forward. Like I said, this is the last Wednesday of the month. This is the last passage that we'll be looking at. This is the last prophet that we'll be looking at also. And we're actually going to the book of Hosea this week. Hosea is an interesting book about an interesting man who sort of had an interesting life. And so Hosea, for the sake of history, Hosea was in the northern part of the nation of Israel. So like we mentioned a few weeks ago, by this time, the nation has split into two. The northern kingdom has kept the name Israel. The southern kingdom has kept the name Judah. But by this point, they've all kind of bounced all over the place in terms of where they were spiritually and how far and how distant they had gotten from God. And so Hosea's job, Hosea's calling, Hosea's vocation was not actually primarily to be a prophet, but he felt led of God to prophesy to the nation. And then one of the ways he did that was actually through his own marriage. Those familiar with the story know that Hosea had a wife named Gomer. The Lord tells him to marry this woman, to go find her to marry. But he tells him to find her in a very strange place. So they don't look, he doesn't look on like Match.com or, Christian Singles Meet or FarmersOnly.com or any of the other places, or the grocery store or the gas station or at the gym or at church. He meets her in a very peculiar place that I'm not sure, to be honest with you, how to say it while still keeping it PG, and there may be children watching this. So you'll just have to read the book of Hosea for yourself to figure out what her profession was. But her name was Gomer, right? And so they get married, and while they are married, they have a child that is Hosea's, and Hosea knows that this child is his. But then over the course of time, Gomer gets comfortable with what she was doing before she got married. And so Hosea then has to go find her again and stay married and stay connected to her. And God uses that marriage, that relationship between Hosea and Gomer to sort of illustrate what God's relationship with the nation of Israel was like, where God says, here I am wanting to love you and wanting to be committed to you. And yet, in spite of all of that, you find yourself chasing after other gods and going after things that you think are more fulfilling when, hey, have I not been good to you? Have I not been more than enough for you? And so that becomes essentially the crux of the message that Hosea has for the nation of Israel. And that primarily gets illustrated through his marriage and through his own life. And he's able to use that as a platform to minister to the nation of Israel. Well, this week covers chapters 11 and 12. All right, so in chapter 12, beginning of verse 1, Hosea says, Ephraim feeds on the wind. He pursues the east wind all day, and he multiplies lies and violence. He makes a treaty with Assyria and sends olive oil to Egypt. The Lord has a charge to bring against Judah. He will punish Judah according to his ways and repay him according to his deeds. And then verse 6 says, but you must return to your God, maintain love and justice, and wait for your God always. The merchant uses dishonest scales and loves to defraud. Ephraim boasts, I am very rich. I have become wealthy. With all my wealth, they will not find in me any iniquity or sin. I have been the Lord your God ever since you came out of Egypt. I will make you live in tents again, as in the days of your appointed festivals. I spoke to the prophets, gave them many visions, and told parables through them. Is Gilead wicked? Its people are worthless. Do they sacrifice bulls in Gilgal? Their altars will be like piles on a plowed field. Jacob fled to the country of Aram. Israel served to get a wife, and to pay her he tended sheep. The Lord used a prophet to bring Israel up from Egypt, and by a prophet he cared for him. So at this point, we find the prophet Hosea speaking to Ephraim, one of the descendants of Joseph. They were sort of split into two kind of sub-tribes of the tribe of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh, based on the two sons that Joseph had when he was in Egypt. But Israel now is being spoken to by the prophet Hosea, and the prophet is warning them about their condition. And like usual, there are some things that we find in these verses. There are some things that we find in this passage that don't just speak to Israel and the nation where they are, because of how their spiritual condition had, or rather because of what their spiritual condition had become, or how far they had drifted away, or where they were spiritually from God. But there are some things that apply to the nation of Israel that also sort of apply to us where we are now. And the first thing that we read is that it is useless to chase things without having God. In verse 1, Hosea says that Ephraim feeds on the wind, that Ephraim pursues the wind, literally chases the wind all day long. In other words, Ephraim is so engaged in this activity. Ephraim is so engaged in this thing that is expending a lot of energy, that is causing the nation, that is causing them to do a whole lot of work, but it isn't necessarily progressing them. Because a lot of things that we think put us in motion don't necessarily progress us. Like the example that always sort of plays in my mind is the hamster on a wheel. I'm sure we've seen, or even if some of us have known people, or even if we ourselves have had pet hamsters that sit in the cage or that sit in that bin. And one of the favorite things that or the customary things that you always sort of see put in there with them is that wheel that they can run on each day, every day. And the hamster is always running. It's always moving, but it's not really going anywhere. And so this is what Hosea says that Ephraim has been doing. By this point, Israel has become a prosperous nation. They have sort of gone from scratching and surviving and barely making it and barely being able to do everything that they needed to do, especially when you juxtapose and when you compare that to their journey through the wilderness and then their journey as a nation to establish sort of a homeland. They had been through all of that. They had not only achieved a sense of stability, but they had also also achieved this sense where they were able now to sort of thrive, and that thriving and their blessings had given them this not just complacency, not just a contentment spiritually, but it also had produced in them this sort of greed where now that I have been exposed to something, I always want more of it. And so the focus then had shifted from maintaining and ensuring that their relationship with God was primary, and now their focus was all about how can they maintain their wealth as a nation. And this is what Hosea says is akin to chasing the wind. If you start running after the wind, you'll tire yourself out. It's almost like a parent who sees their children kind of running around, and eventually, some of the more experienced or the veteran parents, when they see, or when they're out in public and they see their children expending a lot of energy, sometimes they'll say, let them run, let them do all of that, because they know that as soon as they get in the car or as soon as they get home, they're going to tire themselves out, and they'll be so drained from expending all of their energy and playing and in doing all of the other things that are just commonplace for them to do. And this is what Hosea says that the nation of Ephraim has been doing. They've been tiring themselves out trying to make sure that they've been chasing after wealth, but in doing that, they have neglected to keep the main thing as the main thing. So their relationship with God was the thing that was supposed to be primary. When we read the outlines that Moses gives to the people in Leviticus and in Deuteronomy about how they're supposed to act, and one of the things that Moses kind of explicitly says over and over again is that, hey, the Lord is going to bless you. You don't have to worry about that. The Lord is going to take care of you. That's not something that you have to be concerned about. What you have to be concerned about is that you don't get so caught up in how the Lord has blessed you that you forget that the Lord has blessed you in the first place. And that's where Israel finds itself now. They have become greedy, and they've become so accustomed and so addicted to the blessings that they enjoy that they just want more of them, and they are functioning now in a way that seeks to get those without considering that, hey, maybe we should just pause. Maybe we should just be thankful for the blessings that God has given us, because here's the sort of weird thing, or the sort of funny thing that I've learned about God, and I don't want to universalize my own experience, but this is what I've learned, is that God has a way of making sure that eventually, even when it doesn't happen on your own timetable, that even when it doesn't happen in the ways and through the avenues that you think it's supposed to happen or that you expect it to happen, God has a way of making sure that you have everything that you need. Paul says it in the New Testament that God is able to do exceeding and abundantly above everything that we could ask or that we could think. In other words, God has so many ways to get stuff to us that sometimes we can't even think of how it would happen. And God just blesses us in surprising ways and in overwhelming ways. So we don't have to worry about, we don't have to consider blessings or making sure that we have enough or making sure that we have some of the things that we want. Jesus said it this way, that if we seek first the kingdom of God and God's righteousness, that all of those other things, like how we'll eat and the clothes that we'll wear and those material possessions and the things that we need to make it on a very material and a very day-to-day basis in this life, will be met. All of those things will be added to us. So we read in verse 8, Ephraim boasts, I am very rich, I have become wealthy, and with all my wealth they will not find in me any iniquity or sin. And so the other thing that we pick up from this is that our possessions and the things that God has blessed us with are not what defines us. We are more than the things that we carry. In other words, Hosea says, and he paints this picture of the nation of Israel, that they have become so complacent and they have become so accustomed and addicted to the things that they enjoy, that they have began to not just chase after those things, but they've become to idolize those things. They've come to a point where they have placed their trust in them, and they think that because they have been blessed, that that's where that's where their security lies. And Hosea has to remind the nation that you are more, your worth as your spiritual worth and your personal worth is more than the things that you enjoy. And to be honest with you, is that that's one of the lessons I believe that we've had to learn over these past few weeks, because a few months ago, many of us had become so addicted to our cycles of coming and going and our cycles of just participating in the mundane and in the things that draw our attention and that draw our energy and cause us to always be moving, and cause us to always be in motion. And we were so busy moving that we literally didn't have time to think. That we literally didn't have time to kind of stop and pause, that we literally did not have any time to sort of look around and examine who we are, because we had just become so accustomed to everything that we had been doing with all of our ripping and with all of our running and with all of our movement and with running errands and with all of these functions that we had and we thought were a part of us. But now that we've entered into this space where the Lord has sort of made us to lie down, where we have all sort of been giving a forced respite, this forced sabbatical in some ways, where we don't have the ability to get up and go like we once did, or we don't have the ability to kind of get up and just always be moving. And we've had to sit with ourselves and we've had to ask, okay, who am I? Whether I live with other people or whether I live by myself. Who's the person that I live with? Who is the person that I look at in the mirror every day? Because it can't just be the person that goes into the office. It can't just be the person that has this nice place of living, this nice domicile, this nice lodging arrangement, this nice apartment, this nice house. Who am I? It can't be just the person that pays this gas bill every month, the person that pays this electric bill every month. Who am I really? What is it that, or who is it that gives me life? Because now that I have to spend more than 8 hours there, there's got to be more to life than having a nice place to live. So some of us in these past few weeks have had to re-examine our lives, because again, it is so easy to get caught up in the activity and in the mundane stuff that we begin to attribute who we are with what we have. And that's dangerous on a couple levels, because on one level, it can cause you to sort of overlook the people who are around you, who don't have what you have. So you can begin to think either intentionally or subconsciously that the person who doesn't live where you live, the person that doesn't drive what you drive, the person who doesn't enjoy the same things financially that you enjoy might be less of an individual than you are, or they might have less to contribute to the world, or they might be less than a human than you are because they don't have what you have. And only the people who have what you have or have more than you have are the ones who are worth listening to, or who are the ones who are worth giving an ear to, or who are the ones who are worth taking into consideration as an image bearer of God. But that's also dangerous, and it also has the potential to create harm when we look at ourselves. Because let's be honest, we live in a society that operates in a way that judges people based on what they have, right? So much so that if we're not careful, we can judge ourselves in that very same way. So if I'm so busy looking at what you have, I can't enjoy what I have. And if I can't enjoy what I have, I can't focus on the God that gave it to me in the first place. And as long as my self-worth is based on my net worth, and as long as it is based on the things that I've been able to accumulate and the places that I've been able to go, what happens then when all of that means nothing? So let's say someone gives you $5 million, $6 million, $7 million. Go as high as you want. and they give you that money, straight cash, homie. They give you that money and they drop you in the middle of a desert. As great as it is to have that money with in the middle of a desert with no one around, after a little while you'll discover that as great as it is to have that money, it means nothing, because you'd rather trade all of that in for something that will quench your thirst. You trade all of that in to be able to get yourself off of that island, off of that situation, to get yourself out of that place that is causing you distress. Here's my point. My point is that while it is wonderful to have things, and I've lived in situations where I didn't have stuff, and I've lived in situations where I did have stuff, and let me tell you, life is much better when you have stuff. But as great as it is to have stuff, you can find yourself in instances and circumstances and situations and in contexts where the stuff you have means nothing. So the size of your bed means nothing if you can't get any sleep at night. The number of bedrooms has no meaning if there's no peace in the home. As comfortable as your car is, it doesn't mean anything if you can't enjoy it because you're dry, or you can't focus on driving because you're weeping so much. There are contexts where the material things that God blesses us with don't mean as much and don't carry the value. And when we find ourselves in those situations, we have to learn to focus not so much on the things that God gave us, but focus on the God that gave them to us in the first place, and that focus on who God has really called us and made us to be. And so the nation of Israel has to learn from Hosea, just like we have to learn from time to time, that just because God has given you things and given you positions and given you titles and given you prestige and given you things freely, as the Bible says, to enjoy, your worth is not made up based on the things that you have. So I'll say this, and then we can log off and go in and enjoy the rest of our day. When I lived in Philadelphia, I spent time as a chaplain at one of the hospitals. It was part of the program for the requirements for the MDiv program that I was in. We had to do a field experience. And so I did that field experience for 2 semesters, about 9 months, as a chaplain at a hospital. And one of the responsibilities as a chaplain was to serve for the overnight. You had to pick, I believe it was 1 or 2 overnights a month, where you were the chaplain that was on call. And so what happened was, whenever there was a trauma or whenever someone came into the emergency room, it was your duty to go down to the emergency room and to speak with the patient if they were able to speak, and to see who among their next of kin or friends or whoever else that they wanted to call and contact and tell them that they were in the hospital. They would page you whenever a patient would come in and go down to the trauma bay. And I noticed that whenever someone came into the trauma bay and they wheeled them in and they got them into place, there was one thing that sort of universally happened, regardless of what the patient came in to do. The team, when they would gather around them, they would almost always, as a first step, remove the clothes from the patient so that they could get to whatever it was that was ailing them, so that they could fix whatever the problem was on the patient's body. And so they would take these extreme measures sometimes. They would sometimes take scissors and literally just cut the clothes off of a person, no matter how nice the clothes were, no matter how terrible the clothes were. If the clothes cost a lot of money, if the clothes didn't cost a lot of money, if they were able to catch them on sale, or if they were name brand or generic, no matter what they were, the clothes were always the first thing to go. And you know what? I discovered that I never heard happen in all of my time that I spent there. I spent a lot of time hearing patients complain about a lot of things, but I never heard a patient complain about the fact that their clothes were damaged when it was time for the doctor to do work on them. No matter how expensive they were, no matter if they were name brand or generic, no matter if they cost a lot or cost a little, no matter if they loved them or if they hated them, if they planned out their outfit for that day, or if it was a happenstance that they just an accident that they happened to have them on at that time. The patient never complained about the clothes being destroyed, because they knew that it was more important for the doctor to work on the patient than it was for the doctor to work on the clothes. In other words, they had reached a point in their life where the things that they had with them weren't as important as doing the work to make sure that they got healed. The things that they carried with them that they could have even possibly been proud of weren't as important as doing the work to ensure that they were whole. And essentially, this is what Hosea sort of tells the nation, and in a roundabout way tells us as well. That as nice as it is to enjoy things and enjoy the creature comforts that God and life and everything else and privilege blesses us with, sometimes we can't let that get in the way of doing the work to make sure that our internal spirit is made whole. Jesus said it this way: what does it profit a person to gain the entire world and to lose their own soul? And so I pray that this gives us a reason to reflect. I pray that we've had a time to pause and time to consider, that you're staying safe during these crazy, crazy times that we're living in. And if this week or any of the other weeks have been a blessing to you, would you do us a favor? Would you like this? Would you share this? Would you comment? Drop us something in the comment section. Let us know how this has blessed you. And we look forward to seeing you in the coming days, in the coming months, as we continue through our time together and study. Don't forget, our kids are meeting, the children are meeting Saturday evenings rather, at 5:30. Our teens are meeting at 6:30. The adults are meeting Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Our seniors are meeting Wednesdays at 12. Our young adults are meeting at 8 on Fridays. We've got times where just about every group, no matter where you are, who you are, what station you find yourself in life, hop on Zoom, look out for the links, and meet us there so we can continue to grow, serve, and care together. Thank you so much. Enjoy your evening. God bless.
Thanks for connecting with Peaceful Rest, the family of faith. We pray that you were blessed. We invite you to sow into our church. You can give electronically, by mail, or you can stop by the church. We look forward to the opportunity to connect again. The family of faith.